The year was 2009. My brother and I were coming out of a typical day of elementary school, and we saw a random DirecTV ad flyer in the parking lot. After some discussion with our parents, we decided to purchase DirecTV, and that was where we were introduced to plenty of shows that we never heard of before. Cartoon Network was a different case, as I had seen bits of it when going to public places or family members' houses. They were still playing the mid-2000s shows like Codename Kid Next Door, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, Camp Laszlo, and others. I even seen bits of the channel when traveling to Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas, and got introduced to Hi-Hi Pafiavi Yumi and the Ben 10 series, more specifically Ben 10 Alien Force, back when Cartoon Network was obsessed with the Ben 10 franchise. One of my first best memories of watching Cartoon Network at my household was watching the Ed, Edd and Eddy Big Picture Show. Ed, Edd and Eddy was another show I seen every so often, though despite not watching through most of the show, I still had a blast as it told an engaging story and concluded the series on a high note. Of course, this being 2009, it was around the CN Rio era, in which they promoted plenty of live-action shows that I didn't care for. The only saving grace for me was Hole in the Wall, as I enjoyed reality game shows as a kid, especially Wipeout. When doing research, it was originally a Fox show before it got moved to Cartoon Network. This trend didn't last long, and they got rid of all the live-action shows around 2014. Then 2010 came along, as it was a year that Cartoon Network had changed the animation spectrum thanks to Adventure Time and Regular Show. Those were some of the first shows that my brother and I watched in the beginning. In fact, they both still hold up as some of the best Cartoon Network shows of all time. We would tune in weekly for new episodes, along with watching the newest shows they had to offer, like with The Amazing World of Gumball, Uncle Grandpa, Clarence, Steven Universe, and We Bare Bears. It also had a fair share of imported shows like Lego Ninjago Masters Pizishu, Mad, Hero 108, and Dragon Rider at Berg. From the imported shows, I've seen through Total Drama, and yes, even Johnny Test, the most. They even had Star Wars The Clone Wars, which to me is the best Star Wars series ever made. Around this time, there was also Boomerang, in which I've seen plenty of the earlier Cartoon Network shows like Dexter Laboratory, Powerpuff Girls, and Courage the Cowardly Dog, along with the Hanna-Barbera shows of old. Of course, Cartoon Network also aired the recent animated reboots for Warner Bros. Properties, like Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, The Looney Tunes Show, and the 2014 Tom and Jerry Show, in which I'm so surprised by how great the series still is. Speaking of Warner Bros., there was also DC Nation, in which I didn't see much of yet. One of the things Cartoon Network did to celebrate the 20th anniversary back in 2012 was resurrect Cartoon Planet, a cartoon blog in which they played a segment of random shows. It was hosted by Zorak and Brack from Space Ghost Coast to Coast. It was a cool idea as the cartoons from the late 90s and early 2000s, until the recent programming took over and lost the novelty. On the day of the network's 20th anniversary, they played old content for the entire day, which was nice. We adored the channel so much that we actually purchased the Cartoon Network Punch 'em Explosion XL game for the Nintendo Wii. On the surface, it was a game that wanted to capitalize on the success of Super Smash Bros. Brawl, but we didn't care. Looking back, yeah, the game was really flawed, especially with unbalanced physics and a disappointing story mode. Strange that Captain Planet isn't a game, as the show wasn't produced by Cartoon Network, but rather a collaboration between Turner Entertainment and DiC Enterprises for at least the first 3 seasons. Speaking of Cartoon Network games, I spent a solid amount of time playing the Flash games on the website. Some games I remember the most were Chowder's Grumble Gum, a Lego Ninjago action platforming game in which I forgot the title, and some Total Drama ones, mainly the one based on the Dodgeball episode of Island, and most of the World Tour games. There was also a Cartoon Network crossover puzzle game that I also forgot the title of. Though easily the best were the ones for Regular Show, especially Night Marathon, based on one of the best episodes called Grave Sites. Regular Show earlier Flash games were also not too far behind. Then 2015 came around. It was somewhat of a turning point in how I view shows. One day, I was coming back from a school event I had this Saturday morning at my middle school, and when I arrived home, it turns out my parents got rid of DirecTV and replaced it with Dish without any explanation. I was upset about it at first, but got used to it after a couple of weeks. Call me an idiot, but the best discovery about Dish is that I can actually record shows within my DVR. Ain't sure if DirecTV had it back in the day, but if it did, man, I really missed out like a big time. I could have been the cool kid who saved recordings of older shows in there. There are plenty of videos on YouTube of people recording nostalgic commercials and or channel bumpers. It makes sense to talk about Adult Swim here as a tie up to another point I'll make in a bit. I haven't seen their original content at the time, though I mainly spend time watching reruns of the Seth MacFarlane shows like Family Guy and American Dad. 2015 was also an important milestone, as it was the year I started getting invested into animes, thanks to the Toonami block. These days, people stopped caring about Toonami, in which I figured out why years later. What Toonami did to kids in the 90s, it did to me that year. The one show that officially got me into anime was Dragon Ball Z Kai, an abridged version of the original Z. I ain't gonna spend too much time talking about it, but to sum it up, it's one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. To this day, very few animes were able to tell a more captivating story like Dragon Ball Z did, at least until the Cell Saga. There were bits of adult animes I've seen in Toonami though. The most notable one was Attack on Titan, though it was random episodes. I would get the chance to binge the series years later through websites. 2017 I could say was a year that I'd given up on cable television due to transition happened naturally. My parents only decided to keep the free channel to save on money for other bills. This is also when I stopped keeping up with new episodes of the shows that I was invested in. You name it, Adventure Time, Gumball, Steamy Universe, though the last one was for the best. Slowly, I learned about the magic that was streaming services and how it was a wave of the future. I'm probably one of the very few people on the planet who still don't own Netflix on any devices. As I have seen bits of the channels in other places, along with researching them on the internet, their shows from the late 2010s doesn't hold a candle to both Adventure Time and regular show. Perhaps I'm not in the same demographic that these shows are aimed for, which is a shame because shows like OKKO or Infinity Train had really cool ideas, but didn't do much for me. The only one I could think of that comes close is Craig of the Creek, which I believe is the superior Clarence. This is because it leans more on childhood escapism, as we witness these kids having fun adventure within the creek. Speaking of the internet, I would spend a large amount of time in high school binging through the entirety of Teen Titans and Samurai Jack, which holds up as some of the best Western cartoons of the 2000s. I even got a chance to finish the regular show, which also ended on a high note. And that is where my Cartoon Network story comes to an end. I still keep up with the network has to offer from time to time, though for the most part, I moved on from cable TV, as I can watch anything at any time, anywhere. The way I see it, Disney Channel is the most consistent in terms of quality, Nickelodeon has the most groundbreaking ones, though Cartoon Network has the most great cartoons for me. Despite the network having some bumpy roads here and there, it doesn't take away from the fact that Cartoon Network will always have a special place in my heart. If you were able to make it to the end of the video, I thank you so much for tuning in. There was a nice change of pace for the type of content I usually do here, and I shall see you all in the next one. Bye.